That one got away from the Indiana Fever, and it's going to lead to a lot of questions. You could say it was a Fever nightmare against the Dream. Give the Dream credit. They played great. They're a better team than the Indiana Fever right now, a much deeper team than the Indiana Fever right now, and they punched them in the mouth in this game, particularly on the defensive end. Jordan Canada taking the assignment against Caitlin Clark in the second half. The Dream hit the boards big time. Angel Reese continues to rebound at a great rate. And then they've got Ryan Howard and Alicia Gray. It was just too much for Indiana. But when you look at the Fever side of things, there are...
The scoreboard didn't just tell a story, it screamed a warning. Indiana went from dominant to decimated in the blink of an eye, leaving Caitlin Clark staring at the rafters in pure disbelief. It wasn't just a loss, it was a total system failure that turned a Fever dream into a living nightmare. Fans watched in horror as a double-digit lead evaporated, replaced by a level of chaos nobody saw coming. The franchise cornerstone looked completely shell-shocked as the identity of this team disintegrated right in front of her. This wasn't supposed to happen, but the collapse was as real as it was devastating.
Doing the rest of it. So I want to get into all of that and what it could mean going forward. I mean, I really liked the way Indiana started this game. I was feeling good about the way Indiana started this game, as anyone really should have been, particularly Caitlin Clark. She's got Angel Reese here, step back, cash. She hit her first 3 threes in the game to get things started. Again, it looked like they had the formula, they had the rhythm going. She wound up, really, really getting going in that first quarter. 13 points, I think it was, in the first quarter for Caitlin Clark. See her here.
Everything started so perfectly, which only makes the ending feel more like a betrayal. Caitlin Clark came out like a woman possessed, hitting her first 3 shots from deep and putting the entire league on notice. She was toying with the defense, manipulating lanes, and finding her rhythm with ease. For a moment, it felt like the Fever had finally found their formula, a glimpse of the unstoppable force they were promised to be. But that early momentum was nothing more than a mirage, masking the deep-seated issues that were about to bubble over and destroy their night in spectacular fashion.
In the first quarter, for Caitlin Clark. See her here from way downtown. And there was a lot I really liked from Clark in this game, who just continues to improve and continues to get better and continues to kind of toy with defenses and manipulate them in ways that we hadn't really seen her do. She got to the cup a lot as a rookie, actually. But in this one, you just see her doing things, getting to the drive here to the left and then uses the glass on the other side. I mean, she just made a lot of really, really good plays. She's scoring a lot of points.
The highlights from that first quarter were the stuff of legends. Clark pulled up from way downtown, hitting a step-back 3 right in Angel Reese's face that sent the crowd into a frenzy. She was scoring efficiently, driving to the left, and using the glass with a veteran's touch that seemed to suggest she had finally figured out the professional game. At that point, she had 13 points and looked like she was on track for a career night. The energy was electric, and it seemed like Indiana was finally ready to take their place among the elite, but the cliff was much closer than anyone realized.
But she had Tahina Paopao with a grade 3 ankle. I'm glad Paopao wasn't hurt on this play, so we can kind of laugh at it. But both her ankles buckle as Kelsey crosses over. And you feel like when a shot like that goes down, you look at the second quarter there, what's the score? That's a 3, right? Puts Indiana up 11. 6:48 left in the second quarter. Fever should win the game. Or at least they shouldn't get the doors blown off of them, which is what happens in the second half. And that's where the questions come into play. Now, in fairness to Indiana, some of these...
It wasn't just the Caitlin Clark show early on, either. Kelsey Mitchell was putting on a clinic of her own, delivering a crossover so lethal it literally buckled the ankles of Tiara McCowan. It was one of those highlights that should have been the talk of the season, a moment of pure athletic brilliance that put Indiana up by 11 points midway through the second quarter. When shots like that are falling, you feel invincible. You feel like the game is already won. But that arrogance proved to be their downfall as the Atlanta Dream began to wake up and realize they were being embarrassed on their own court.
And then there was the 5th foul on Aaliyah Boston, and that exposes another issue with Indiana. But this was, the challenge thing with Stephanie White again. Here, it's the 5th foul for AB. And, I'm sure she's got people looking at it and telling her whether they think it will be overturned. But as high leverage as this is, and as little contact as that was, marginal, incidental, I think if you're Stephanie White, like I said with Caitlin Clark, you got to challenge that for your star player, for the stuff that I just talked about, to set the precedent there. Set the precedent. And then
the shift in momentum was subtle at first, then it hit like a freight train. Atlanta didn't just play better, they decided to punch the fever in the mouth, metaphorically speaking. They ramped up the physicality, particularly on the defensive end, and Indiana simply had no response for the intensity. Jordan Canada took the assignment of shadowing Clark in the second half, and the results were immediate and jarring. The passing lanes that were wide open minutes ago were suddenly jammed, and the easy drives to the rim turned into contested nightmares that left the rookie sensation searching for answers.
Angel Reese made a nice play on this one, getting out, going in transition. And she actually took it all the way up over Kelsey Mitchell with the size advantage. And once Boston is subbed out of the game, the Fever just have no answers inside, right? And you get to a few things. I talked about the issues in this game to me, again, were foul trouble and were the turnovers and just the force Atlanta played with, give them credit. Some of the issues. The lack of identity also, which I want to get to in a little bit deeper fashion. The bigger roster construction issue.
Then came the officiating, which only added fuel to the fire of frustration. It felt like every time an Atlanta player drove to the basket, a whistle followed, sending them to the free throw line and slowing the game to a crawl. Lexi Hull played some of the best straight up and down defense you'll see, yet she was constantly penalized for marginal contact. It's hard to build a rhythm when the whistle is working against you, and you could see the exasperation growing on the Indiana bench. They weren't getting the same benefit of the doubt, and that discrepancy started to eat away at their composure.
You could see Clark, she's growing increasingly frustrated and even detached at times, but she started so well, she was cooking so well, she didn't get the same level of touches. And I noticed after the turnovers in the third quarter, and I don't know if this was a cause and effect thing, because again, Caitlin, some of those turnovers were forced by Atlanta, but some of them were just bad turnovers by Caitlin that she shouldn't have made, to borrow the phrase from Kelsey Mitchell, boneheaded plays. And those are the ones that bother me, either unforced turnovers or obviously turnovers that lead to scores. But then I was sitting there watching, like, why doesn't she have the ball? Space the floor for her, give her the ball, set screens, dribble a handoff, let her cook.
The absolute low point came with the 5th foul on Aaliyah Boston. It was a moment that exposed a massive rift between the players and the coaching staff. The contact was incidental at best, the kind of play that begged for a challenge in a high-leverage situation, yet, Stephanie White stood by and watched as her star post player was sent to the bench, potentially ending any hope of an interior defense. It was a baffling decision that left fans and analysts questioning the strategy. Why wouldn't you protect your best players when the game is hanging in the balance? The silence was deafening.
That identity. And that's a question that falls at the feet of the head coach, because the bulk of the criticism, who Caitlin Clark is. She's been balling. Obviously, AB and Kelsey Mitchell are who they are. So when the results don't wind up, and when you still see them playing almost as if sometimes they're overthinking or a chicken with its head cut off, that becomes a coaching question on when are you going to settle in on exactly what this team is going to look like night in and night out, or else, people are going to start questioning her job security.
Without Boston on the floor, the interior of the Indiana defense became a layup line for the Dream. Atlanta's bigs were simply too good, exploiting the lack of size and presence in the paint with ruthless efficiency. Angel Reese was a force of nature, continuing her historic rebounding streak and making Indiana pay for every missed shot. She even took the ball coast to coast, finishing over Kelsey Mitchell with a size advantage that looked unfair. It was a total collapse of the defensive structure, a complete failure to adapt once their primary rim protector was sidelined by foul trouble, the third quarter was where the wheels officially fell off the wagon. Caitlin Clark, who had been so precise in the first half, started making turnovers that could only be described as inexcusable. Some were forced by Atlanta's stifling defense, others were just unforced errors that left the coaching staff fuming. These weren't just lost possessions. They were catalysts for Atlanta transition points that blew the game wide open. It was a shocking regression from a player who usually has such high basketball IQ, and it signaled a total breakdown in the team's offensive identity and focus. Kelsey Mitchell didn't mince words after the game, calling some of the mistakes bone-headed plays. That's a harsh assessment coming from a teammate, but it was the honest truth of the situation. When you are fighting for a playoff spot, you cannot afford to hand the ball over in the middle of a run. Those unforced turnovers are the ones that haunt a team, the ones that lead to late-night film sessions filled with regret. Indiana was playing like a team that had never been in a close game before, despite having veteran leadership on the floor that should have known better. But the issues go much deeper than just a few bad passes. There is a glaring problem with the roster construction that was put on full display against the Dream. The broadcast even pointed it out: Indiana still hasn't found a stretch four who can play effectively alongside Aaliyah Boston. Myisha Hines-Allen had wide-open looks from deep but refused to pull the trigger, showing a lack of confidence that crippled the floor spacing. When your secondary options aren't willing to shoot, it allows the defense to collapse on Clark and Mitchell, effectively neutralizing the entire offensive engine. The lack of depth is becoming a recurring theme that threatens to derail the entire season. Outside of the big three, the production is almost non-existent. Monique Billings gave them some energy with 7 points, but she also racked up 5 personal fouls in just 13 minutes of play. When you're relying on a handful of players to do everything, exhaustion and frustration are inevitable. Only 4 players on the entire roster scored more than a couple of buckets, a statistic that makes it nearly impossible to keep up with a deep, balanced team like Atlanta. Even more concerning was the defensive performance that allowed Atlanta to set a franchise record. You can point fingers at the refs or the foul trouble, but at the end of the day, you can't let an opponent walk all over you like that. The Fever looked like they were overthinking every rotation, playing like chickens with their heads cut off as the Dream sliced through them. It's a coaching question that needs an urgent answer. When is this team going to settle into a defensive identity that actually works? Right now, they look lost, and the results are getting uglier by the week. As the game slipped away, the camera kept cutting back to Caitlin Clark, and her body language said it all. She looked increasingly frustrated and, at times, completely detached from the huddle. After her hot start, she barely saw the ball in the second half, a coaching decision that left everyone scratching their heads. Why wouldn't you let your best playmaker cook when the offense is stalling? Instead of using screens and dribble handoffs to give her space, the team seemed to move away from what made them successful in the first place, leaving their star stranded. The gap between the first half Fever and the second half Fever was wide enough to fit an ocean. It's one thing to lose a game on the road against a tough opponent. It's another thing entirely to look like two completely different teams in the same 40 minutes. That lack of consistency falls squarely on the shoulders of the leadership. Whether it's the players failing to execute or the coaches failing to adjust, the result is the same: a humiliating collapse that has the entire league talking. The Fever nightmare isn't just a clever phrase. It's the current reality for this organization. Stephanie White is now facing the kind of scrutiny that comes with managing a generational talent. In the WNBA, the spotlight is brighter than ever, and every decision is dissected by millions of fans. Failing to challenge a critical foul on Aaliyah Boston wasn't just a tactical error. It was a perceived lack of support for players, and that sets a dangerous precedent in the locker room. If the players don't feel like their coach has their back during the tough calls, the trust begins to erode, and that's when a season can truly fall apart from the inside out. The Dream deserve all the credit in the world for how they handled the Indiana hype. They didn't back down from Clark's early brilliance, they leaned into the fight. Rhyne Howard and Alicia Gray were relentless, proving that they are currently the much deeper and more disciplined squad. They showed Indiana exactly what a playoff-caliber team looks like, and the contrast was jarring. While Atlanta was moving with purpose and executing their sets, Indiana was scrambling, making desperate plays that rarely resulted in points. It was a master class in professional composure versus rookie panic. Looking ahead, the road doesn't get any easier for the Fever. With games coming up against the Mercury, they don't have time to lick their wounds. They have to find a way to fix the roster gaps and the coaching indecision before the season slips away entirely. The talent is clearly there. We saw it in the first 20 minutes, but talent without a clear identity is just a recipe for heartbreak. Fans are starting to wonder if the current system is actually designed to maximize what Clark and Boston bring to the table, or if they are just making it up as they go. The turnover issue is perhaps the most fixable, but also the most frustrating part of the equation. Clark is going to have high turnover numbers because of her usage rate, but the inexcusable ones are what need to stop. When she is trying to thread the needle through 3 defenders instead of taking the simple pass, she's hurting the team more than she's helping. It's a learning curve that every great player goes through, but the stakes are higher for her than almost anyone in history. Every mistake is a headline, and every collapse is a national conversation. What's truly shocking is how quickly the optimism can vanish. 1 minute, you're up by 11 and looking like a contender. The next, you're being blown out and questioning everything. This game was a microcosm of the entire Fever season so far, flashes of brilliance followed by total darkness. The fans who traveled to see Clark were left with a sour taste in their mouths as the team folded under the slightest bit of pressure. It's a pattern that needs to be broken immediately if they want to be taken seriously as a championship threat in the future. There's also the question of job security that is starting to whisper in the background. In professional sports, when you have a roster this talented and results this inconsistent, the head coach is always the first person to feel the heat. People are going to start asking when this team will finally settle in. If the answer isn't soon, changes might be inevitable. You can't waste years of a generational talent like Clark or a dominant post like Boston on seasons filled with identity crises and second-half collapses. The clock is ticking. The locker room atmosphere after a game like this must be heavy. To go from such a high to such a low in less than 2 hours is emotionally draining. Clark's shock isn't just about the loss. It's about the realization of how much work is left to be done. They aren't just a few plays away. They are a few fundamental shifts away from being the team they want to be. The collapse against the Dream was a wake-up call that they can't afford to ignore, a brutal reminder that the WNBA doesn't care about your highlights if you can't finish the game. The shockwaves from this collapse will be felt long after the buzzer. Caitlin Clark is learning the hard way that talent alone can't bridge the gap when a team loses its soul mid-game. The Indiana Fever are at a crossroads, and the direction they choose will define their entire season. Will they find their identity, or will they continue to crumble under the pressure of expectation? One thing is certain, the league is watching, and right now, the Dream is a nightmare they can't seem to wake up from. The question isn't just what happened in Atlanta, but whether they have the heart to make sure it never happens again.